working with people in order to build technology that helps people to manage care and improve people's lives. So today the focus is on user research. We've got Melanie Lim, who is one of our user researchers in Spark, who are design agency that sit alongside BGSS. So Melanie is going to talk you through sort of about 20 minutes this morning. The format will be, if you want to ask questions in the Q&A down at the bottom, please do so, and we will answer them at the end. We've got about sort of 10-15 minutes for Q&A. Anything that doesn't get answered today, that we will come back in a blog to you guys on, so do feel free to ask us difficult questions, and we'll go away and ask people that maybe know a little bit more than we do if we are stuck. So if you wouldn't mind say keeping the Q&A down there, and we will get to it towards the end. So I'm going to hand over to Melanie, who is going to talk you through the rest of the presentation. I hope you guys enjoy it, and if you've got anything else that you would like us to cover in the series, we're doing these every Wednesday morning, please do either comment in the Q&A or drop us an email on either LinkedIn, and our details will be at the end of the presentation. So I hope you enjoy it, and without further ado, I'll hand over to Melanie.
Thank you, Lorraine. So yeah, first of all, I just wanted to thank you, all of you, for being here, especially this early in the morning. I appreciate the fact that it's only 8 a.m. I can't see you, but some of you might still be in pajamas, eating breakfast. I don't know, but really thank you for taking these 30 minutes for being with me and listen to me talk. And I really hope that those 30 minutes will be worthwhile and that you will learn something. So I really like you to contribute to this discussion as well, and just let's keep it casual. If you have any comments, please feel free to drop in a message, a nice comment, an emoji, I don't know, or you can also raise your hand if you relate to what I'm saying, if you agree. So yeah, without further ado, let's get into the topic. So today I'm going to talk about how to understand your users in a remote world. So remote research has been quite a trendy topic these days, and with reason. So we're all in quarantine now, and the fact that we can't meet the users, it's actually really challenging what we have, the concept that we have of user research itself, because our main goal is really to go and meet people and try to understand them. So this comes as a little bit disconcerting, and especially because we have to adapt ways of working, and we're not used to it. So I can understand that it's quite scary, because doing remote at a distance is not what we're familiar with. But now, let me tell you one thing, is that if you're here, I don't want to pat myself on the back or anything, but if you're here, it means that you are already thinking about your users. And if you have asked yourself, how do I do remote research? It means that you are already in the right mindset of empathizing with the users and thinking of them and their needs. So it's already a great position to be in. And you will see that if you keep that mindset, all the obstacles that you need to overcome will be way smaller than you think. And you always have ways to get around them and overcome them. And I will help you for that. So I have 5 obstacles to remote research. And for each of them, I'm going to give you some tips to overcome them. And just let me know if those obstacles are something that you come across, and if it's something that you can identify with. The first one, obstacle 1, this one is quite an obvious one, and it's quite a large one as well. We have a lot of things to say in this. Unfortunately, I'm conscious of the time, so I'll give you 3 tips. So what do we do if we can't speak to the users in person? Personally, I've been told so many times how when you do research, you have to be careful between about the difference between what a user says and what a user does. Sometimes what they say is not the same as what they do, and you have to be careful of this. But now, being unable to observe the user, you lose a lot of visual data, and facial expressions, body language, all of these things well, you don't have them anymore. So what can you do? First of all, just turn the camera on. So this comes as quite logical. This will give you the visual data that you need, but at the same time, you have to keep in mind that people are not necessarily comfortable with turning the camera on, and you have to respect that. So yeah, maybe you will be deprived of your eyes. But if that's the case, what can you do? Is just boosting your listening skills. When we talk about empathy, there's no fixed rules, or you have to be in the same room as the user, or you have to observe them. It's just paying close attention to them. It's really trying to understand what they're feeling and what they're saying. So if you listen to the users, you will get a lot of information that even they can be unspoken, like the tone of voice, the little hesitations. It's a good way to spot whether they're annoyed or enthusiastic or being very happy about something, and nothing is preventing you from asking a follow-up question. So if you do a usability test and they took a long time to do a task, to find a button, you can just ask them why and how they feel about this. The last tip for this first obstacle is having a longer introduction. So for this one, it has less to do with how to make up for the visual data that we're losing. It's more having to do with how to build a connection. From a personal point of view, I think it's easier to build a connection when you're in the same room as the people. If you meet them, it's easier. So when I have a call, I will take a bit longer to introduce myself and make sure that they understand everything. Let them know as well, because we're all working from home, that if you have any disruptions, then it's fine. If your kids are interrupting you, if you have noisy neighbors, I can relate to this. Well, it's all fine, and it's just a matter of making the user, the participant, feel comfortable so that they can open up to you. So yeah, that's for my first obstacle. Now onto the second one. So this one, it is hard to get people to participate. So this one is quite tricky, because even when you're not working remotely, sometimes it's really hard. And with the situation that we're in now, it's even worse. So the first tip is quite straightforward. I'm not going to get into this in too many details. It's just giving them an incentive. If you can, it helps. But the second one, I think it's one of the most important one, is adapting the format, the duration, and the schedule. In the end, you can see this as doing a mini research within the research and try to understand the users. So why are they not willing to participate, and what can you do to make them come? So make them come to your research. So if you think about the situation right now, people might be way busier than before because we're in the pandemic. If you want to test with a healthcare worker, well, they're very busy because they have to deal with the pandemic itself. And if you want to ask to someone who has kids, well, their kids are not in school right now. So, sometimes it's hard to manage. So instead of asking them 1 hour in the afternoon between 2 and 3, you can just ask them if they're willing to have a little chat with you for 20 minutes around a coffee. It's just really adapting the session to the user's availability. The last one is quite related to it as well. So I was thinking of, in those circumstances, you have to be very mindful of people's health. So mental health, physical health, if they're feeling unwell, they don't feel comfortable doing your research because it's not the right timing. There's another reason as well, which is you're working from home, and I don't know how many Zoom meetings you have in a day, but research is optional. So if they can have, one less meeting during the day, then personally, I would gladly do it. I would gladly say, no, I don't want to have my 8th meeting of the day. So it's finding alternatives, and by alternatives, I mean in terms of methodology. It's finding something that is more flexible maybe, and that will allow people to do it in their spare time. So if the timing's not right, it's fine, because they can do it whenever they want, and you don't have to be with them. So I'm thinking of diary studies in which they have to self-assess and self-evaluate. I'm thinking of surveys and questionnaires in which they just have to click on a link. So it's really not necessarily the best methodology for your research, but it's the best one according to the circumstances. Obstacle 3, well, you've tried your best, but you didn't succeed, and you couldn't find anyone. Fear not, because, you know, as long as you have, well, humans around you, you will never find yourself without any data to work with. You work with other people, you know other people, so use your team's insight. You have stakeholders that usually have a lot of knowledge about the project. You have devs who know a lot about the technical aspect of the project, and you can even ask other people from other team, or, you know, the HR team, the reception, whoever you can find. Really, it's better than nothing. And yourself, you have to trust yourself, your intuition. You have experience with user research. Maybe some of the if you're a researcher and you've done this before, some of the things that you found on a design pattern, maybe it's still relevant for what you're trying to test right now. So really, it might not be the profile that you're looking for, but it's still, you know, valuable data in the end. In the same way, you can use personas. So if you have existing personas, or if you can create prototype personas based on assumptions of what type of people would use your website, because it will help you visualize as well. You know, it's easier to ask yourself, to put yourself in someone's shoe, and asking yourself, well, Darren, 65 years old, not tech savvy at all, what would he think of, you know, having random pop-up notifications on their smartphone? Whereas, you know, Jessica, who's 18 years old and who's a boss on Instagram, well, she's used to this. So, you know, just trying to put yourself in their shoes. But what's important to remember here is that you have data, it's fine, but it's still not ideal. You really have to acknowledge the fact that these are not the end users. And so you have to assume at some point that those things could be wrong. And what happens if your design decision is not working? And you can create a risk model for that. So what I usually do is I have several levels of risks. So what happens if they can't find the submit button? Well, it means that they can't submit their questionnaire. If they can't submit their questionnaire, then they can't register to the system, and so on. If they can't register to the system, well, the company will lose clients. That escalated quite quickly, but you get the idea. And this will give you a backlog of work. So you can prioritize those risks and assess the size of these risks and whether they're urgent or not. And so, you know, for the future, when you can find users, or when the quarantine is lifted, you can pick up those tasks and improve further. The fourth one is more specific to workshop. So I talked about how hard it is to find users, but now you have to find several users that are available at the same time. It's even harder. So I'd say this is really obvious, but be super organized. First of all, if you're very ahead of this, it will be easier for you to get people together, ask ahead for their time and schedule. And then you have different ways of facilitating workshop. I can give you three suggestions. So the first one would be organize a drop-in session. And actually, when you're remote, it's easier because it's just a link online. So what we use is Miro. So this is a collaborative tool online where people, you know, can collaborate at the same time together. You can see mouse moving around. So it's quite nice. And if you do some kind of, you know, you're here for the whole afternoon, and then people can jump in and out. It makes it easier and more flexible for people to participate to your workshop. If you give clear instruction beforehand, and then if by any chance you have 3 people at the same time, just take them in hostage. Ask them if they have 10 extra minutes to spare so that you can all discuss together. One thing that my colleagues have done as well, because they had to do workshop recently, is try to make the sessions shorter and pre-populate the board. It was either because they had prior knowledge about it, or you can set an assignment beforehand. Again, the people can do it in their spare time, and when you get the answers back, you can structure the board yourself. So instead of having half an hour of populating the board and half an hour of discussion, you can just have half an hour of discussion. It makes the session way shorter and easier. Or you can also divide the 2-hour-long session into multiple parts and small chunks of exercise. So again, it's a matter of what's the best for you and your users, and try to adapt. But there are many ways to facilitate a workshop. Last obstacle, but not least, is that so many things can go wrong when you're remote. And talking from a personal experience, I've did a lot of remote research in my past project with the NHS, and so many things did go wrong. And what I've learned from that is that the key is just being very well prepared to any of these possibilities. So first of all, you can avoid a lot of technical issues if you pilot test it first with a teammate and check your own equipment, and then plan backups. So it's asking yourself, what do I do if someone can't share the screen? What do I do if the microphone isn't working? And then it will help you, continue your research without being too disturbed if that happens. And then keep the communication going, because when you have technical issues, you don't have any control over this, and it could be quite stressful for both you and the user. So you have to make sure that both of you have a way to contact each other if something goes wrong. Email, phone number, just saying, I'm having trouble with my Wi-Fi connection, for example. And really, this one is really important. Just, it's okay to fail. Sometimes it happens. I did this mistake once of, trying desperately to fix the problem. And it would have been way easier to just agree to interrupt the session and resume later on. Your attitude do a lot as well to reassure the user and show them that you can manage and that you're not panicking or rushing through things. One of my colleagues had trouble logging into the conferencing tool, and so she interrupted the session and she followed up offline with a prepared questionnaire, so the person could do the test in their spare time again offline. And it worked very well. So again, it's really a matter of being prepared for any of these possibilities. But it happens. It's okay if things doesn't work. It's really how you react to it. So these are the key takeaways. I'm conscious of the time, so I won't dive into it, but they are a summary of what I just mentioned. But what I really want you to remember is that, and I'm going to skip to this one, is that you have to choose between the best methodology that will give you all the data that you want, but taking the risk of not finding any participants, or really focusing on your users. And again, empathy begins before the actual interaction. Is trying to understand what the users, why the users are not coming to your research, and try to adapt the format to it. And if the methodology is simpler and not perfect, then it's fine, because the important thing here is, as long as you have room to improve and are aware of the risks, it's okay because methodologies are flexible and you can always improve upon it, whereas you don't have control over the users. They will come or they will not. So in the end, it's better to make sure that you will have those feedback and just keep iterating. You can't never have a perfect research in one go anyway. Now, I'd really like to finish with just reminding you that, remote research is not the last resort that has been forced onto us because of this lockdown. It's just a different way of collecting data. And I think I did more remote user research than face-to-face research in my past project, and we were at the office. It's just that sometimes this is what works best. So yeah, and I give you some tips to overcome those obstacles. So I hope that that you will consider remote research even when we're not, in lockdown anymore. And yeah, so yay, remote research, it's cool. So that was me. And if you want to get in touch with us, here are our contact details. And now, thank you very much again. And now on to the questions. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks, Melanie. So in terms of questions, if people want to put Q&A in the bottom of the screen, please do ask us some questions. To get things started, I've got a question for you, Melanie. So you've talked about remote research not necessarily being sort of a lesser form of research. What would you say are some of the benefits of being able to do things remotely now rather than having to do them remotely?
If I think of, my past project, we weren't in lockdown at all, and we still chose to do remote research because, first of all, it's time saving. You don't have to schedule an appointment in the lab, for example. You don't have to move to someone else's office, ask them to move to your office. So it's time saving. It's also you remove all the location, the constraint, because I had to interview a lot of people across the country. And, sometimes it's fine to stay in Leeds and interview people in Leeds, but in my situation, I really needed to interview as many people as possible because their pain points were different depending on the regions. So this was why I chose to do remote research. So this is very, very practical for these kind of situations.
And going back to your point around sort of showing empathy before you start in terms of being sort of sensitive around the way that you schedule things and the way that you kind of approach things. At the moment, obviously, people are under a lot of stress and a lot of worry. Do you think that that is changing the way that people are and should be approaching research? And what recommendations would you give for people trying to engage quite stressed out people at the moment?
Well, it doesn't really change the way we approach research, but I think it's just that we're in a situation where we're really forced more than ever to think of those situations. So it's nice to be reminded that, people are really stressful and sometimes they don't want to come to research. So as I said, it's really trying to make it as simple. And again, try to put yourself in those people's shoes. If you're really stressed out and someone asks you to spare 1 hour of your time to do research, would you say yes or would you say no? And what would make you say yes? So if someone is just asking you to have a cup of coffee and have a little chat and, we're just going to discuss about this issue, it might be a bit more welcoming than, hi, I want to interview you. I have 20 questions and I need an hour of your time between 2 and 3. So it's how you approach people, how you're interacting with them. And yeah, it's trying to find out what works best. And if they don't want to engage with you online, as I said, you have other methodologies like surveys or diary studies. You can set, those assignments to them and they can do it offline in their spare time, and they can come back to you whenever they want, when they have time with their answers.
We've got a couple of questions from the floor. So one is, what if people don't want to put their webcams on, or if they don't know how to, how can you still get the feedback that you need?
I did so many research without the webcam on. So the awkward silences where you don't know whether it's because people don't understand the question or if it's because they're still thinking of what to say. I had a lot of these situations trying to figure out whether they're annoyed or is it because they're just distracted by something else. So yeah, and not being able to see people is sometimes it's quite bothering. But as I said, you can get a lot of information just by asking them questions. It's like, when you're on a call with someone that your friends or family, and you just ask question, and if you don't understand what they say, you can ask again. What did you mean by that? How did you feel? So prompt them to express their feelings because you can't see it on the screen. So it's fine if you can't see them. It's fine if they don't want to put their camera on. But just really paying attention to them and work with what you have. So obviously it will not be perfect, but it's still a good start.
And next one is, what remote tools would you recommend for research, and what if you want to record the session?
So again, for example, for the workshops, we're using Miro. So this is a collaborative tool for people to edit the same document at the same time. It's quite nice. You can do post-it notes and drawings, etc. In terms of more common methodologies like usability tests and interviews, usually I try to keep it simple because those people are not very familiar with using complicated tools or anything. So I will use a conferencing tool, just like Zoom or Skype or Teams. Usually they have the screen share feature, and I personally record the session with QuickTime, but I think Zoom, for example, has an integrated recording functionality. So I do this, and usually I always ask for other people's help from my team so that they can take notes. I can even pre-populate something for them, like an Excel spreadsheet, for example, so that it's easier for them to take notes. So it's really just doing it just as you would face to face, but you just have a screen between you. But really, everything, taking notes, speaking to people, etc., is just really similar. So yeah, I try to keep it simple and just use regular conferencing tools. But I know that you have some tools that are specific to doing usability tests, for example. So I haven't really dived into it really. And also you have a lot of survey tools as well. Just Microsoft, Google do that with nice analytics. Qualtrics, Typeform, you have a lot of survey tools too.
We've got a couple of questions about kind of workshops. So one is around how you make it kind of engaging and how you structure it to make sure it's fun. And one is around, I think it's the same sort of question around what tips you've got around doing group research remotely.
Yeah, so it's true that it's very difficult managing people remotely. You can't see them and they're all in different houses. And it's hard to also try to assess who is a little bit more of an introvert, who hasn't spoken yet, and just trying to engage everyone is more difficult. But I think it's just setting a relaxing environment. So just before you start, have a nice icebreaker. Get people engaged by talking about things they're familiar with before diving into the topic. So ask a nice question, oh, what did you do this weekend? Or what's the last film you watched? And that will make people less shy maybe and be more engaged from the beginning. And so at the end, it will come more naturally to them. And just, just take your time. If someone wants to grab a cup of tea or a snack, it's like they can do it as well. And then for the workshop itself, again, it's really being well prepared. Usually it helps to have a nice structure in place for example, I'm thinking of the Miro board. if you have a nice structure already in place with clear instructions, it will go way smoother. So yeah, I think that works well. And you can also, for example, in Zoom, you have different rooms. So if you want people to be less shy, and sometimes they're more comfortable talking with 2 people rather than 10, you can do separate rooms and ask different questions to different rooms, and they can just discuss between each other before getting back all together and having a little recap. And just, yeah, be mindful of try to pay attention to people who has spoken, who hasn't spoken. And maybe it's not because they don't have anything to say, maybe it's because they have a weaker voice, you know, they don't have as a strong as voice as other people. So let everyone the chance to say something, like calling them by their names and ask them if they have anything to add, for example.
A really interesting question here about selection bias. So around being able to reach all groups of users with remote research, like older adults, low income users and children. So around how you get, I guess, a representative sample of users when there's obviously some inherent selection bias which sits in terms of being able to have access to the computer. So just in terms of how you would overcome that, or any hints and tips you've got around reaching those harder to reach, sort of less technology able or adaptable groups.
Yeah, this one is interesting because this is a question that we're asking ourselves so much, and I don't think I have the perfect answer, because the people who are excluded from technology, unfortunately, I have to admit that for remote research, sometimes it's just not possible to reach them. So the less techy method that you can find is probably calling them on their phone. So if you can prepare interviews and simple questions to ask on the phone, then it's fine. If not, just, you know, if you're conscious of the bias in the selection, just be aware of this. And as I said, you can keep track of the people that you've interviewed. And if you think that there's someone missing from your pool of participants, that if there is a particular profile that you're missing, just put that in the backlog of tasks and come back to it later when it's easier for everyone. Sometimes it's just not the right timing. So, you know, maybe in 2-3 weeks time, you will be able to reach those people. So just adapt the methodology, try to find something simple. So phone calls, maybe, like, you know, just text messages, sometimes that works too. You can find out if people, sometimes a lot of people are coming back to their parents' house. So if you want to reach maybe older people, you can ask to one of your participants, are you leaving at the moment with your parents or with your grandparents? If so, do they have time, you know, do they have 15-20 minutes to talk to me? This kind of things. Yeah.
Awesome. A kind of linked question actually from the workshop question around how you get people back on track, so how you refocus people when things go off topic, which I'm sure it must do quite a lot.
Well, be assertive. Just you know, just trying to get back people on track. I mean, this is kind of a soft skill, really. I don't think there's like a fixed method to do this. It's just, I don't know, please people, let's be back on topic, really. But the thing is, you have to very acknowledge people that go off track, because sometimes they still have interesting things to say. But then when it's your turn to speak, just start by acknowledging what they've just said, and then just continue by saying, okay, but now back to this question. What would you think of? And then you just can go back on track. And you can use, you're online anyway, so you can use the board too. If you're using something where you can write on the screen, you can put an image or visual, because people are focused on their screen anyway, they will see it. So if you put like a big post-it note saying, question 3, let's go back to question 3, well, everyone will see it. So I think that would be a nice way to get people back on track.
And then the final question is any other tools you'd recommend besides Miro? So you talked about a lot of sort of survey tools as well, but I guess for online collaboration, anything else you found that works particularly well aside from Miro?
Mm, I don't know, really. To be honest with you, I've used Miro a lot and I've been really satisfied with it. So I haven't really looked into other things because this is what our team is using on a daily basis. But any other collaborative tools work. So Miro is a board, so you have a lot of freedom to be creative. But even if you use simple uh, sharing platforms, just like SharePoint or Confluence. Like Confluence is not, for example, it's not the best for everything, but in my past project, we used that a lot because it was really easy to share documents with people and to edit at the same time as well. And yeah, I think you do have other tools that are quite similar to Miro in terms of this workshop format, but I'm not too familiar with them. But I can look them up. Sorry, I don't have an answer right now, but yeah.
No, all good. And I think that was all the questions that we had. So just wanted to say thank you everybody for joining us this morning. There'll be another session next week where Tim Williams, our head of client services for healthcare, will be talking about how to kind of deliver at pace without compromising quality. So hopefully you'll be able to join us. We will also be posting the questions and answers on LinkedIn, and also this will go live. So we will send you an email with the YouTube link as well. So just wanted to say thank you very much for joining us. I hope you have a
Thank you very much.
splendid rest of Wednesday, and yeah, hope to see you again same time next week. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Have a nice day, everyone.
Bye.